Good morning, dear friends, and very warm welcome to this two-day national webinar on media profession today, issues and concerns. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor B.P. Virabhadrappa sir, Chairman of the Department, Professor Varghese, my colleagues, Professor D.S. Purnananda, Satish Kumar, Dr. Satish Kumar, Mrs. Rumana Tanveer, students, research scholars, and participants from across the country. At the outset, I would like to thank all of you for overwhelmingly responding to this two-day webinar. Dear friends, media profession is in a very difficult phase today. Perhaps it is facing one of the biggest crises in history due to COVID-19. Corona has in fact altered the very nature of global economy. In fact, it has impacted all sectors and professions, and media is no exception to this. In India, for example, major newspapers have shut some of their editions, reduced the number of pages, and are downsizing their staff. TV channels are also doing the same. Many experienced journalists have been removed, and those who have managed to survive are being asked to work for 15 days a month and for half a salary. It is in this context that the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication is organizing this two-day webinar. Over the course of 2 days, eminent journalist Mr. Dakshinamurthy is the associate editor of the Federal.com, Mr. Giri Prakash, associate editor of the Hindu Business Line, Mr. Kesri Haravu, award-winning filmmaker, and Mr. Santosh Chandrasekhar, assistant professor, University of Denver, USA, will be talking about a range of issues like professional concerns in digital and print media, challenges and opportunities of filmmaking in digital age, race, caste, and media. With this brief note, I request Professor Varghese, chairman of the department, to welcome all of you. Go to you, Varghese.
Good morning, friends. Good morning, friends. It's a great opportunity to welcome you to this webinar. Definitely, COVID has changed the entire platform of conducting these learning experiences from seminar to webinar. And definitely now we are welcoming you to this learning opportunity to learn about what is happening to the professional journalists, in this difficult situation, not only the COVID-19, but also the globalization and the privatization and the political bureaucratic interventions into journalistic profession and their activities. All this has impacted the profession in a big way. So let us these 2 days discuss on these issues from 4 aspects and 4 dimensions and 4 viewpoints of 4 eminent scholars. So first of all, I'd like to welcome our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Virabhadrappa sir, and he is going to inaugurate this webinar. And definitely all the participants who are in line with us from across the country, and definitely a few from outside. I welcome you to all this learning experience in personally and on behalf of the department. I welcome all the professors, research scholars, PG students of different universities to this program, and wish you a beautiful learning experience these 2 days. Today we'll be having it at right now, then afternoon 3 o'clock, tomorrow morning 10 o'clock, and afternoon 3 o'clock. And welcome you all to this 2-day learning experience. A hearty welcome to you all.
Thank you, Professor Varghese. Now, I request Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor B.P. Virabhadrappa sir, to deliver the inaugural address.
Good morning, everybody. I feel extremely happy to associate myself with the national webinar organized by the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication on the title Media Profession Today, Issues and Concerns. I feel it's a great privilege for me and congratulate the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication for having thought over an interesting issue on the present context of media profession as to what are the challenges before the media as to what are the concerns and as to what are the tasks before the media profession. First of all, I want to talk about some of the issues that we have undergone, particularly after COVID-19, as to what were the issues that were very much associated in the context of globalization, privatization, and also liberalization process. So where things were very clear in the context of the expansion of the media market and how new players entered into the national and international media market, and as to what was the necessity of the emergence of global media conglomerates. Now, this is one interesting question, that the recent global pandemic that has actually created some of the issues. And I believe that mass media is an important institution in a democracy. Well, in the present context of the COVID-19 and passing through the 19th century, 20th century and 21st century, I feel that there are certain implications, particularly as to what has been the media profession and as to what the stress and strain that has been very much there on the media profession, particularly in the context of the loss of job and also the working conditions and the loss of salary also. As to how this media has been subjugated to different market forces, to different advertisers, and how these advertisers and also ideologies have been influencing the media content. Well, there are certain issues that are to be clarified, that are to be compromised, particularly in the context of the COVID-19. Why professionals are losing the independence of thinking and also writing? So where you really look to the question of democracy or the question of mediocracy or the question of political democracy or the social democracy or the economic democracy. As to how the question of survival, what Darwin's theory of survival, values and ethics are changing because survival has become very much part of the life. There are certain diversity of opinions, but as to how the diversity of opinions have been able to create such a value-less economy or value-based economy and ethics-oriented economy. So what has been very much called, truly in the context of finding that this media profession has been it plays a very significant role in disseminating information and creating awareness among the people. But what has been the real challenges, and as to how we may be able to look to the task before the media profession, maybe in the context of digital technology, as to how there has been a change in the platforms and the changes in the platforms that has actually taken place. Every media channel opening digital platforms, maybe web journalism or free space to free speeches also, as to what the aspects that you really look to, either in the context of finding that there should be freedom, maybe freedom of speech as what we understand in the Constitution, maybe in the context of their rights and also duties, as to what are our duties and how journalism profession has been able to play in the global pandemic world, the media role, what importance that you are able to find, how the credible information would be provided to the society, to the community. We are passing through a very crucial time. But what is the crucial time that the media has been facing? Maybe if you are able to understand the different sectors of the economy, so the most important part of democracy has been the media. But as to why the crucial aspects that the media has been facing to the standards of journalistic ethics, I think that is the major problem that we have been able to understand, either in the context of the democracy that has been practiced in the Western countries, the journalism practiced in the Eastern countries. But unfortunately, few of the media have failed to fulfill their professional and social commitment. Well, that is what you really understand in the European economic model, in the European social model, as what Rawls' social justice talks about, or some of the European thinkers like Jacob Weiner, James Mead, Richard Lipsey, Kelvin Lancaster talks about building a free and a democratic society. I think there you really find that there are two issues that are being clashing as to why the value-based or ethical-oriented or maybe of taking objective-oriented journalism and the question of survival, maybe the question of advertisement, or maybe the question of creating awareness in the minds of the people, or maybe this pandemic which has become epidemic also, have been able to find that there are certain conflicting issues. Now, as a social scientist, I also understand as to how we are able to face these situations or how we are able to tackle these situations also. Is it the question of ethics, or is it the question of value-based journalism, or is it the question of looking to the very fundamental aspects of mass communication or journalism or media profession? I think there are some of the questions that are to be answered. As to what these questions are to be answered, how these questions can be answered. I congratulate the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication for having taken up such a task. I congratulate the entire team of the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication who have been able to take this national webinar, inviting almost all the people all over the world, where we really talk about some of the people who are really involved in this journalism profession, like Mr. K.S. Dakshinamurthy, Mr. Giri Prakash, Mr. Kesri Haru, and Dr. Santosh Chandrasekhar. So I congratulate the Department of Journalism for involving almost all the people from all over the world and taking these questions into this webinar for 2 days, August 13th and 14th. I congratulate the department, I congratulate all my faculty colleagues for having made up this opportunity, for taking up this opportunity to discuss these issues, to throw light on these issues and how we may be able to make it travel. The Postgraduate Department of Journalism and Mass Communication in our university has been doing a very wonderful work. So I feel very happy, I feel extremely glad to inaugurate this national webinar on a very interesting theme, on a very interesting and research-oriented concern that our journalism colleagues have taken up this national webinar titled Media Profession Today, Issues and Concerns. So I wish all the best and I wish all the success for the webinar, and I wish all the participants to have an equal participation and make a thorough discussion, raising some of the questions, maybe on digital media or maybe on the print media, or maybe on the different aspects that have actually happened in the COVID-19, the challenges and also the opportunities, and also the very ticklish issues that are being very much associated in the journalism profession. I thank you very much for having given me this opportunity. I wish all the best for the organizers, all my colleagues in the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication. All my respects and congratulations to Professor D.S. Purnananda, Professor Varghese, Dr. Satyaprakash, Dr. Satish Kumar, and all the research scholars, all the students, staff members, all of them who are involved in this program, maybe MPhil students, PhD students, PG diploma students, all of them. I give a big load of applause for having done this venture. Thank you very much for having given me this opportunity. I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much, sir, for that encouraging words. Now I request Professor D.S. Poonananda, sir, to talk about the theme of the webinar, and also to introduce Mr. Dakshinamurthy, today's resource person.
To this webinar, this of journalism, and generally a sea change in the last few years is the media profession. Professional practices that were believed to be essential in media have given way to new practices and standards because of several factors. There are some good changes that have happened, but there are also a lot of bad things that have happened in the last few years. While some people say that commitment of journalists to professionalism has actually declined over the years, others say that commercialization and convergence of media technologies have significantly contributed to the decline of professionalism. The change has been happening, but it is not that everything has declined and everything is so bad. The changes have happened, but these changes have had their impact on the way the media profession is practiced, not only in India but throughout the world. And today the nature of job for journalists has actually changed. The editor's job today is not only to edit newspapers, but also to help their organizations boost their advertising revenue. In fact, as you see today, technical skills have become more important than professional competence, your professional efficiency, or the knowledge that you have about the subjects on which you are going to write. In fact, speed has become much more important today than accuracy. Lot of things get reported in media very often. Sometimes there are a lot of errors, there are a lot of inaccuracies, but the focus of the media seems to be the speed. There's competition among media channels and competition among newspapers and television channels and the digital media to give the news and analysis as fast as possible. But this obsession with speed has actually led to a lot of problems. And there are questions about who these professionals are. Whether they represent the diverse Indian society, whether all communities are represented, whether the minorities are represented, whether the marginalized sections of the society are represented. So there have been a lot of questions asked about who are these professionals or whom do they represent, and about whom do they write, and what kind of news do they put out. So the background of the journalist also is a factor. But then there are a lot of factors that work behind production of news. Journalists actually work in a situation where there are a lot of pressures on them, all kinds of pressures. They may be coming from the organizations they work for, they may be coming from political institutions in this country, or they may be coming from other organizations and groups of communities. So journalists today is under tremendous pressure. So the journalistic practices, which were said to be the standard practices over the years, have actually changed over the years. It is no longer the kind of profession that people practice, say, in the 1970s and in the 1980s. And journalists today are working under great pressure. In fact, I should say greater pressure than they used to be earlier. There is contractualization of jobs. There's a casualization of jobs. People are being hired on yearly basis, on specific job, job basis, and many, argue that this kind of contractualization and casualization of jobs, in media organizations, have weakened the profession. In fact, contractualization and casualization of jobs, have affected the quality of journalism, also the quality of people who work for different media. In fact, these journalists are forced to do more work in less time. In fact, it is the communication technology or this the convergence which has actually put a lot of pressure on the journalists. So the job which used to be performed by 3-4 journalists earlier is now performed by a single journalist. And the studies have shown that wherever the journalists enjoyed security of their jobs and assurance of work for certain period of time, the standards of journalistic practice have always been higher. In fact, there is another thing that the research tells us. As we know, unions of journalists or trade unionism among journalists is nowhere to be seen today. Unions of journalists were very, very active in the 1970s and 80s. Today, like the entire labor movement is collapsing throughout the world, even the unions of working journalists have not been vibrant, have not been raising questions, have not been united, in fact. And studies have shown that, wherever unions have been very strong, professional standards have also remained very high. That actually shows that these are the journalists who are committed to professionalism, and if certain practices of a profession are affected by certain factors, they stand up and raise questions, and they want to preserve the tradition of the profession of journalism. And we need to reflect on these issues at a time when COVID-19 has led to instability in several professions. This is not which is peculiar to journalism, but then this is one profession which has been affected to a great extent by COVID-19. There have been many retrenchments, a change of jobs, withdrawal of many of the concessions that were given to journalists, many of the benefits that were being given to journalists. So journalists today is under tremendous pressure compared to what the situation was a few years ago. So overall, what we see is that this profession is facing so many challenges. The earlier practices, have given way to new kinds of practices. And we have today with us Dakshinamurthy, who is going to speak on professional concerns in the digital media. The growth of digital media has been tremendous in the last 1.5 decades. In fact, even the print media are also, slowly shifting to the digital mode. And interestingly, Dakshinamurthy has been in digital media for more than a decade now. He has been a journalist for more than 3 decades, and he has worked for print media and also digital media. He is presently associate editor at the Federal news website. It's the federal.in. Besides writing for the federal.in, Dakshinamurthy writes for prominent publications in India and abroad. Dakshinamurthy is a BSc degree holder. He did his BSc and then did his MA in political science and MPhil in international politics. He began his career in 1983 with the Sunday Midday in Bangalore. And then from there, he moved to many other media houses. He worked with the Indian Express, he worked with the Press Trust of India, he worked with the Deccan Herald, and also the Hindustan Times. Dakshinamurthy was a key member of the editorial team that launched the English language version of the Al Jazeera news website in 2003. All of you know that Al Jazeera was the first West Asian channel to present a different perspective on international affairs. Dakshinamurthy was based in Doha. from where he wrote extensively on the US invasion of Iraq, and also a lot of stories on West Asian politics. He presented one of the very views, one of the very few views that we get on the situation in West Asia. Much of what we read actually comes from American newspapers, news agencies, and television channels. Al Jazeera made a difference, and a lot of Dakshinamurthi's stories appeared on Al Jazeera's news website. Dakshinamurthy returned to India in April 2006 and continued his professional work. He briefly returned to Al Jazeera in 2013-14 as India online editor for his news website that was based in Bangalore. And besides working for these newspapers, Dakshinamurthy was also the editorial consultant and trainer with the Hindu newspaper. He was with the Hindu newspaper as editorial consultant from 2006 to 2014, and with the Deccan Herald from 2014 to 2015. Dakshinamurthy is also the author of The Anopheles Sting, a book of fiction published in 2003. The Anopheles Sting is based on his experience in reporting the situation in West Asia. We are very happy that Dakshinamurthy agreed to participate in this seminar and speak on professional concerns in digital media. I had met Dakshinamurthy sometime back last year, although I had known him for many years, and his experience in the last 3 decades, has seen lot of changes taking place in the media media world. I'm sure he can speak with a lot of authority on what has been happening in the media profession today. I thank you all. I now request Dr. Satya to invite Dakshinamurthy to make his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Sir, before we move further, there is some instruction to the participants. In order to avoid disturbances, we have muted all participants, and participants can post their questions in the chat box after half an hour, first 30 minutes, once Mr. Dakshinamurthy starts speaking. Then we'll pick the questions and post those questions to Mr. Dakshinamurthy, and he will answer. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dakshinamurthy, sir, for joining us. Over to you, sir. Now you can deliver your talk, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone, and thanks, Mr. Purnananda, for the introduction. At the outset, let me also tell you that I find it far more comfortable talking to in a physical space, in an auditorium, and it's a little awkward talking to a computer screen. But then I think these are strange times, and then I guess we have to move with the times. So, of course, I've done a few conversations on Zoom, but it still makes a lot of difference when you actually physically are present in an auditorium. But then, so coming back to, and then the other point is that we are in a digital age, and the media is, of course, totally part of it, and I think all of us have to probably relearn and relook at the way we have done our work all these years. See, the point with the digital medium, and I'm going to really be talking about where are we as far as the digital medium is concerned. it's very clear that the digital medium is here to stay, and it is the medium of the future. So as far as the media is concerned. So, and actually we are still in the initial stages. For instance, when I joined Al Jazeera in 2003, basically Al Jazeera management was Arabic until then. They had an Arabic television channel, and also they had an Arabic news website. So they wanted to make the transition to English so that their news could reach larger parts of the world. So they opted to go in initially for a news website. So I was in the team of some 10 people who launched the website. So I was editor there. But so since then, I have been at some level involved with this medium, this website, news websites, and all that. And even in 2003, when we started, the Al Jazeera news website, it was quite advanced. And then, of course, money was not an issue with the management. So they got the best of systems, but still, it was confined only to the laptop or the computer. So, but since then, say in the last 17 years, I think it has come a very, very long way. So today, much of the news is, seen on, on mobile phones. And then it's not just, the visualization of, the news. It's also how we even report news, how we edit news, how we work in the newsroom. So what has happened is that there has been a tremendous change. There's been a tremendous change, and the media is still, still to recover from it, because we are still in the initial stages only. See, in history, probably 1 decade or even 2 decades actually doesn't amount to much. We are still in the infancy of the digital medium. So along with the opportunities and along with the potential, there are also a lot of challenges. So let's look at this, point by point, and see where we stand and how the outlook is. For instance, if you take news, okay, I've also worked a lot in traditional media. I was with the Hindustan Times, like what Purananda said. I was with the Indian Express, all the legacy media. I've also worked there, for a long time. So, in traditional media, you have a newsroom, you have a certain set of jobs that people do. A reporter will go and report. You will have a person on the desk who will be editing. Then you also have people at the back end composing, all kinds of things. And then you have a production team that produces the newspaper. What has happened, since then, this entire thing has changed completely. Today, for instance, if you look at the digital media, for instance, if you take, I worked with this a website called thefederal.com, which we started that this last year. It's part of a well-known Tamil television group called Pudhiya Thalamur in Chennai. And this is, of course, an English channel. It is, though it is part of the same group, we act quite independently of the channel. So, what has happened is that in the newsroom, see, today is, suppose, let's say I'm a reporter. It's not, in the digital medium, you have journalists who not only need to report or edit, they have to multitask. They have to do everything. Okay, they have to report, they have to edit, and not just that. Not only do they have to do that, when they, let's say, for instance, there are riots in Bangalore yesterday. So when the reporter goes to cover that story, the reporter will also have to take a video and then edit the video, and the video also should be there on the website. And not only video, then you have what is known as podcast. So where the reporter will talk to somebody, on the spot, and then even that forms a component. So earlier, a reporter would go do the reporting, come back, file the story on the typewriter or the computer, and the job is done. But today it is not like that. So very fundamentally, things have changed. The way reporting is done itself is changed. And but what is also happening is that not everybody is quickly adapting themselves to the new situation. And so this is a challenge. So because much of the media, like people like me and many others, were all people who were trained and who grew up in the legacy media, in the newspapers. So we have a certain kind of an idea. We think along certain lines. Now all these things have to change and have to change dramatically. So there is what is known as a convergence of all the streams today. For instance, if you work, say, after we started with print, and then the next big change that happened was television. Okay, so what would happen in television is that, again, you had a certain kind of working, you needed to know the technology. There is a, you go, you have a camera with you, you go shoot, then you anchor, etc., etc. But it's still confined only to the video. So in the case of the digital medium, you have a combination of all the three. So it's very, very crucial that a person who joins the digital medium should be aware of all these three. Otherwise, what will happen is, if you are unilinear in your approach, then it will limit your growth in the in the media space. Okay, so this is one element. It's more like a example I'm giving you. So this is one element of it. That is the how work happens within the newsroom. Okay, so the other thing is, if you take journalism itself, if you take the larger, in what is the context in which the news website is functioning, the news website or the digital medium is functioning in a larger context, which has changed dramatically. For instance, if you earlier, if you wanted to be a journalist, let's say I want to be a journalist, I have to join a newspaper or I have to join a news agency. So basically, only then I can call myself a journalist. Yes, I could be a freelance journalist. I could be an independent journalist. I could go, report to whomever I wanted. But that's about it. But what has happened, okay, today is that anybody can be a journalist. Anyone with a camera, anybody with, with a recorder can be, and you can be at any point. Let's say, for instance, you are just standing in a bus stop on the road, and then suddenly in front of you, a big accident happens. You tweet that accident, you take a film of that accident, and then you put it out on, say, Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. So what you're basically doing is the job of a journalist. Okay, so while this in some ways is good, because no point of the world is remote enough, because people are there everywhere. So if something happens, say somewhere in Rwanda, or something happens in a small village in, say, in Iceland, all it needs is for somebody to be there to witness it, and within minutes the entire world will get to know about it. But this was not the situation, say, when newspapers, there were only newspapers, the news had to travel. So if something happened in a remote corner of the earth, it would take a long time for the news to spread. It would take sometimes 1 day, sometimes even 1 week for the news to actually circulate and percolate everywhere else. So today, which means, what it basically means is that today, technically, every person on this earth is a journalist, potential journalist. Okay, this may sound very interesting. It is interesting, of course, but so what has also happened is, this has completely, let me say, it has kind of obfuscated what media is. Because since everybody feels that they're all journalists, and everybody looks at television, they look at the digital medium, and they feel that, oh, that's all, this is all journalism is. Oh, I can also do this. Oh, I can go and write something, or I can take a film and shoot this and post it on the social media. So what this has basically done is, it has completely freed up this whole institution of reporting and this whole concept of news. It has completely opened it out. Now, what has also happened is, while there are some positives, definitely, because let's say, for instance, if you're in a building which is on fire, or you're trapped inside, you send out a tweet or a Facebook, immediately people will come and they'll help you. That's the positive side of it. But the negative side of this is that a lot of people are misusing this medium, or misusing this technology, misusing this power to put out false news, distorted news, or news that serves a certain vested interest. It could be a political party, it could be a political group, it could be an ideology. So there seems to be great difficulty in controlling this. And then we call this fake news. So all of us have at some point of time or the other been fooled by, news that comes on WhatsApp. Particularly WhatsApp is probably the most notorious. So because it's easy for you to write something and post it, and then it goes to say few million people. And then there is no responsibility, there is no accountability. You can write whatever you want, you can distort pictures, you can even do Photoshop. So what this has done is, this is a huge, in fact, I wouldn't even call it a challenge. This is probably a big crisis, because what this basically does is that it mixes up fake news, it mixes up unprocessed news with the processed news and the traditional way of reporting that, all of us do. So which, for instance, you know that, suppose, let's say I go out and report, let's say I'm working in the current place where I'm working, when I go out and report and when I file something, there are people at the back end who are looking at the story, they're asking me questions. Sometimes when I make a certain allegation, they want evidence of that. So what it basically does is that there is a lot of processing that goes on, say in Deccan Herald or Hindu or Times of India or Indian Express, all these places, or in the Federal or in Al Jazeera, BBC, all these places, news is processed. So you can't put out fake news. It's very, very difficult. You can't, you can of course go wrong in reporting something, but that will be a genuine mistake. It's not deliberate. Okay, so most of the time. So, and then there are people at the back end to question, ask, etc., etc. And then if there is something wrong that has actually appeared, there'll be an apology. There'll be, they'll express, whatever their unhappiness at, having, done that. So there is a lot of accountability. You can go to the court, file a defamation against the particular publisher. You can get damages. All kinds of things. There is a legal process as well. None of this is present in, when people present fake news. In the case of fake news, suppose something is blatantly false, when there is a police case that is filed, or it affects a lot of people, like what we saw in the riots yesterday. Somebody put out a tweet or a Facebook post, basically which made some allegations against a certain religion and all that, and people got upset. So somebody in that very serious situation, action can be taken against the person who posted. But there are varying degrees of fake news. Sometimes it can be a slight distortion. Sometimes it can be an attempt to change history itself. So in these cases, what happens? The people who file this, they get away with it. So this is a huge, not only a challenge, like I told you, it's a huge crisis. Now, this is something that all of us within the news profession, and who have spent a big part of our lives in this job as a journalist, we are all really wondering, where is it all heading? What is going to happen? Because also, this feeling that everybody thinks they know what the media is, that is also a problem. They come up with their own conspiracy theories, why some papers do what they do in a certain way, why some television channels are pushing things in a certain way, so there are all kinds of conspiracy theories. So everybody feels very closely, linked to a media establishment. Now, this is a problem. It's a problem because when you feel you don't know something, you'll try to learn. But when you feel that you already know something, then it's a problem. So this is something that, hopefully, as the years go by, people will be I'm saying the viewership, or the people who read this, who consume news, who do other jobs but then look at news. Hopefully, they will learn. They will learn how to, sift the truth from the falsehood, or maybe certain, some kind of mechanisms will evolve, which will hopefully try to marginalize or sideline in this fake news. So it's probably already happening, but it's going to take a long time. So this is a huge crisis. Now, as far as the other element of in the digital news medium is the reach. For instance, earlier, if I was working with Deccan Herald and if I was reporting something from Bangalore, it would appear in Deccan Herald in Bangalore or in Karnataka, or in the Karnataka edition. So my reach is limited. So when I think of news, and when I think of something that is, let's say, that is happening in a particular part of Bangalore or in Karnataka, or say in Hubli or whatever, the news would largely be confined to Karnataka. But in the digital medium, the entire world is your space. I mean, you write something about some small accident that happened in Hubli, for instance, okay, which, one truck hitting a scooter or a car hitting a pole or something like that. Somebody sitting, say, in UK or New York or California can go to your website and see what is happening in Hubli that day. So, which means that the reach of this digital medium is amazing, in the sense that the news that you think of will be there all over the place. And then you have a lot of Indian diaspora, for instance, people who are Indians who are from Karnataka or from Bangalore, who are working in different parts of the world and all that, and they would really want to know what is happening in Bangalore. So all they have to do is go to the Deccan Herald website or any other website, click the website and then see, and they will know what is happening in Bangalore. So it's so news. So what this has done is that this is also so when you are thinking of news and how to project a story, all these things become very important. See, so what has also happened is that if I don't know how many of your journalism students are journalists, but then you, in this old style of journalism, you had what is known as a pyramid style. Then you also had what is known as a circular, or where the news that happens closest to you is what is most important for you. And as the news goes far away, let's say something happens, let's say I'm in Bangalore, so if something happens in Bangalore, it's most important for me. Next in Mysore, then to Chennai, then to say Bombay, then Delhi, and then abroad. So the interest in the news kind of it gets diluted as it goes far away. So I may not really be concerned about what is happening, say, in New Zealand or something. In Auckland, I may not really be bothered as much as I'm bothered about what is happening in Bangalore. But this digital medium has collapsed everything. It has completely, changed this entire pyramid scheme and this, this idea of what is news. That whole concept of what is news itself has changed dramatically with the digital medium. So now these are some of the very good things I would say about what the digital medium has done. Is it has completely churned the medium, and it has completely turned the news cycle inside out. There is nothing like a news cycle. Like, say, in a newspaper, you would file your story in the evening or in the night. It would appear the next morning. Okay, so there is no other way by which it is done. But in a digital medium, you can file a story at any point in time. For instance, you file it in the morning, then people who are awake at the time in the world will read that story. Suppose you file it in the night at 12 o'clock. People in the other part of the world, say if you're in India, say in the other part of the world, it would normally be the US, say in California. Somebody would be sitting there and doing the story, looking at your story. So it has turned everything inside out. So even journalism itself needs to be relooked afresh, especially if there are journalism trainers, journalism universities, journalism colleges. People have to relook news in a different kind of way. I mean, let us assume, I'll just give you a simple example. Let's say there is a cricket match, a T20 that started today in the morning in Bangalore, in Chinnaswamy Stadium. It starts at 10 o'clock in the morning and goes on till about 5 o'clock in the evening. Okay. Now, that is reported minute by minute, second by second on television. Then you have the same thing being reported on a website, on all news websites. This is the latest, wickets are falling, people are whatever, this is the score, who's playing, who's, all that. So by 5 o'clock in the evening, actually everybody knows about what happened during the cricket match. Okay. Now, what do newspapers do then? Traditionally, when you look at this coverage, the next morning we would look at let's say there was a match between India and West Indies. The next morning you look at the newspapers, you would have heard the news on the radio earlier, or even watched it on television, but then you would be really looking at the newspaper the next day to see some of these interesting details, some offbeat things, which you probably wouldn't have known when the match was on. But today, it's covered, end to end so deeply and so extensively. The newspapers actually have a problem. Like, what will they cover about the match, which people already don't know? So this is a challenge actually. But then most of the time, the news will still appear, India scored 343 for 3 or something like that. Whatever, which everybody knows, it will just appear there because people just don't know how to handle the news. And then the confusion, should we give the basic news and then talk of some other angle which others haven't covered? Or, all these are issues. So what happens is, this is the problem, when I tell you that the news is, the cycle has changed, the concept of news has changed. All this, the digital medium has completely broken everything. It's broken all the existing structures, traditional structures of the media. So this is something, but then what it also does is, it is a challenge. This is something that you can't, sit back and say, okay, fine, no, we cannot do anything. We cannot put up our hands and say, sorry, we can't do anything either. But then we have to learn with it. We have to grow up with it. Otherwise, the media will die. If if the newspaper next morning does not report something different, people will stop buying the newspaper. And this is what is happening, actually. This is what is happening, because by the time you get to read, say, a newspaper in the morning, you already know most of it. So many people have actually stopped buying. So it has become a crisis for the print medium, this extensive coverage of news. But then the digital medium, okay, for all its potential, for all its ability to convey news in a certain way, is also facing a massive problem. You may think, oh, in fact, it's very easy to start a news website. All you need to is to have a basic idea about journalism. You need to have some experience. You put it all together, you get a technical support, and you can come out with a website. But then the point here is, then what? Once you come out with a website, then what do? You put out news, okay, great. And there are people who are, reading your news. But we all forget that at the back end, there is something called money. There is something called funds. And, you need to pay your journalist, you need to pay your technical team, you need to pay the platform, you need to keep the thing going. Everything, is determined in terms of funds. I mean, the site, your host, who's hosting your website, the news website, you have to pay. So there is a lot of hidden costs at the back end. Now, it's fine. It is still cheaper than starting a traditional newspaper. Today, if you need to start a newspaper, you need a printing press, you need machinery, you need this, you need a building, you need, 100 other things. Same thing with television. It's very expensive to start a television station. But the news website is easy to start because it's, it doesn't require that much of funds. But that is a trap. Okay, it's a trap because the challenge in a digital medium is, how do you run it? How do you keep it going? And for that, you need money. Okay. Now, how do you get money? Because most of news websites are free. And what has also happened is that people have got used to this freebies, So all you have to do is go to ndtv.com, just click on the website. You read the news, you don't pay anything for it. Okay. And then now you come to our site, thefederal.com. You'll just click on the Federal site. You will see the stories, you'll see special stories. You will like some of them, and then, or you may like all of them. I don't know. I mean, it depends on the story. So, but the point here is that we get nothing. The viewer actually does not give any money, does not shell out any money. Okay. This is the general system that, is prevailing at the moment. Okay. Now, one reason why this whole thing was free is also because, let's say, for instance, 1 million people come to my website. Okay. When 1 million people come to my website, advertisers are interested. Okay. So we would think that, okay, let 1 million people come. We will give them the news for free, but we will make up with the advertising that would come in. Because if 1 million people are watching a website on a daily basis, every day, 1 million people come and see your website. So 10 lakh people. So obviously advertisers will want to, use that platform to, project whatever goods that they have. So, but, this is true. And this is also the way it is. But in reality, there is a massive distortion that has happened. Okay. Because what has happened is that as far as advertising is concerned, you may not believe it, but 80% of advertising goes to 2 organizations in this world. Okay, just 2 organizations in this world grab 80% of advertising, and that's millions of dollars. And these 2 organizations are Facebook and Google. They get all the advertising anywhere in the world. They are monopolies actually. Okay, so the websites like ours, or any website, they have to depend on this remaining 20%. Okay, now out of the remaining 20%, you have big players within the country. I'm basically talking about India. Okay? So there are big players within the country, let's say like Times of India, for instance, and they get a massive out of the 20%, they get a huge chunk. So the others are left with even lesser. Okay, so it becomes very difficult. So advertisers don't come, or even if they come, the cost of advertising is much cheaper than, say, for print or for television. So you cannot survive on mere advertising revenue, even if I'm talking of average players who are not Facebook or not Google and who are not big organizations like, say, Times of India or Hindustan Times or whatever. So there is a huge problem there, and then it becomes very, very difficult. So the other option is what? The other option is to pay for what you read. Let us say there is a very good piece on, say, Kamala Harris. She's become the vice presidential nominee now, yesterday. And let's say Federal has done a very good piece on Kamala Harris, which you want to read. It circulates. But when you go and click it, you'll find that you have to pay some money to read it. $10, $15, I don't know. I mean, we have not yet started. I'm just saying, so if you want to pay money, you'll be surprised. A large percentage of people don't want to pay. They don't want to pay 10 rupees. They don't want to pay 15 rupees. This is I would say this is more of a cultural thing, This is more a cultural issue. We spend, a lot of money on, let's say we go to a hotel, restaurant, we'll be, eating all kinds of things. Sometimes we may we may watch movies. We'll spend on many things, on clothes. Maybe you'll buy a shirt or a pant or some dress which you actually don't need, but you will still buy it, spending, say, $800 or 1,000 rupees, But when it comes to spending on news, when it comes to spending on news websites, people hesitate. They don't normally pay, even if it is 50 rupees or 100 rupees or 200 rupees. That is the way, unfortunately, it works. For instance, if you look at our newspapers, it costs $5. Some of these big newspapers, they charge 5 rupees. Can you imagine what can you do with 5 rupees? If I give you 5 rupees and say, please spend the 5 rupees, you will come back probably with the 5 rupees in your pocket saying there's nothing that is available for 5 rupees, except maybe a newspaper, So there is an issue here. And also what has happened is, from the time the internet started until this point, we have got used to free content. We got used to free information. Okay, so it becomes very difficult for us to think of spending money to read the news. Okay, no, this is something that I don't know, if in this last say a few months, about 4-5 months, that we have media is going through a massive crisis in India. Many outlets have shut down. There has been layoffs. Salaries have been hugely cut. Okay, and many are actually in danger of even shutting down. All these things have happened. Now, why have these things happened? Because the ad revenues which used to come in earlier have dried up. Ad revenues have dried up because there has been a shutdown, lockdown. The economy has gone to the dogs. It was already doing very badly before the COVID, and COVID has completely finished it. So the point is, how will the media survive? Because the media survived because it always depended on the ad model. It depended on advertising. That is why a paper like, say, Times of India or Hindustan Times or Indian Express, they could give you a newspaper for 1 rupee. Can you imagine? You get sometime back, a few years ago, 15 years ago, you could get newspapers for 1 rupee. So today, slowly it has crept up to 5 rupees, but that's it. But in real terms, if the newspaper really charged money, the amount that is required for the establishment to continue or to function, each person would have had to pay not less than 15 to 20 rupees for 1 newspaper. That would have been the real cost of the newspaper. But then, unfortunately, all of us have got used to this, cheap news, or so what is also happening is that is impacting the digital medium. Okay, so and many of these websites are basically function on grants. You have this there are these media bodies, which are funded by people who are interested in the press and the media, where they don't expect any returns. Some big industries and big philanthropists, foundations, and all that. So what they do is they have set up these organizations which actually give grants to some of these websites. Okay, and these websites run on the grants because they don't get actually any revenue out of their content. Okay, so this is a huge challenge, and I mean, a point will come when everybody will have to pay for what they read, and that's how it's going to be. It also helps. See, for instance, depending on ad revenues, also makes the media less independent. See, sometimes we don't connect the dots. People don't realize that because newspapers or in a digital medium, when you get things for free, you depend on advertising. And let us say you are anti-establishment, or you are against the government, you oppose the government, or you oppose any particular business or a company. Okay, the company will immediately shut down the advertising. They will immediately shut down the advertisements. And then there have been news establishments in India where the government has actually cut off advertising because the newspaper went against the government or criticized the government and all that. Now, the point here is that because the advertising is the lifeline for the media, it makes the media less independent. If hypothetically speaking, if people paid for what they read or people paid for what they bought in terms of newspapers, the media would be far more independent. So then it doesn't depend on advertising. It depends on the subscription, the subscribers. And subscribers are normal people like you and me, who want a functioning democracy, who want India to be a vibrant free country. So all these things will help if that little amount of money is paid. So this is a big challenge. So and then different people are trying to handle it in different ways. Today, for instance, this e-paper, which earlier was free in say Times of India was giving it free, then Hindu was giving it free. Today, all of them are actually charging money for it, and there are many other establishments that are actually going in for this subscription model. So, the other thing with this whole thing about this multimedia, okay, is that strangely, multimedia is kind of not strictly regulated. Because even though the technology is changing so fast, it's changing so fast that the government is finding it very hard to keep up with it, because the internet technology itself is such that it is very difficult to kind of rein it in. So what happens is governments are also breaking their head trying to figure out how to control this. For instance, I'll give you an example. If you want to start a newspaper, you have to go through certain procedures. You have to get sanctions, you have to get your title approved, you have what is known as a register of newspapers in India, the RNI. They have to clear it. The government has to give sanctions, permissions. I mean, so the same is the case with television. Television also is also like that. It is not it's not simple to start a television channel. There are all kinds of permissions you need to get. In fact, sometime back, a couple of journalists wanted to start a television channel and the government refused to give permission. You must have come across that. So in the case of the digital world, in the case of a news website, there is nothing. You just think of a plan. You have a few people who are pulling in money. You have the requisite funds. You have journalists on board. You have a technical team on board. You have a plan. You have everything worked out. You can just start off. You can start off next week. You don't really need any kind of permission. I mean, you don't need, you don't have a strict governmental control over it. Now, I think the government is kind of realizing that they need to do something about that as well, because, sometimes freedoms are, governments particularly don't like freedoms basically because they feel very uncomfortable. So they try to regulate everything. So even in the case of the digital medium, I think there is also some kind of a talk going on, in governmental circles to somehow regulate this. It may, how it will turn out, we don't know. But the point here is that that will be one more obstacle, or it could be either be an obstacle or it could be a opening up, or a better way of doing things, but I seriously doubt it. Given the government's past record, I don't think it's a great idea. But the issues that this is being discussed right now. So kind of concluding what I have said so far, it's briefly this, that media is today in a state of say it's in the crossroads, or where nobody really knows where it is heading. That's number one. Number two, the whole concept of news is changing. Number three, within news establishments, there is a complete change in the way journalists do their work. Okay. Number four, the potential of the media is enormous. Today, you can read New York Times on your website and on your laptop at home the same day. Similarly, somebody in New York can read, say, the Hindu the same day. So the reach has become tremendous, which means the potential has become enormous. And also the challenges. So the first challenge is that of fake news, because everybody is now, thinks he's a journalist, and then you have the ability to type out whatever you want. So vested interests have actually got into it. It is, unfortunate, but then that's the way it is. So fake news is competing with genuine news for the attention of the reader. Okay, and people are still not, they have not woken up to the dangers of fake news. So that's a challenge. And the next challenge is that of funds, how to earn revenues from the business that you are doing. And then the overall challenge, the subscription model, and the changes in that, and also the how the consumer needs to also change, and in some ways help out the media by thinking of paying for what they read. So broadly, this is what is the I would say the entire landscape of the digital medium, and I think broadly this is what it is, and I hope I've covered everything that I wanted to, and it's open for questions. So
Thank you very much, sir, for the wonderful talk. You have talked about positive and negative aspects of digital media. You also talked about various shades of fake news and the lack of accountability from one who creates it. And you also rightly termed it as one of the biggest crises in our present time. Okay, sir, we have some questions coming in. We have a question from Mrs. Divya Chaube. How difficult it is to stay updated in digital media, and is news blogging is an option with the digital media coming in? Is news blogging is an option for freelance journalists? This is a question from Mrs. Divya Chaube.
News blogging, is it?
Yes, sir. News blogging. Yes, is news blogging is an option for freelance journalists?
Okay. See, the issue here is that you have blogs, but what has happened to blogs is that you can blog, you can have your own blog, and you can file stories on that, etc., etc. But then the point here is that when news blogs began, it attracted a lot of attention, because for the first time an individual could open a website, and it's a blog basically, and then whatever you want you could write in that. Okay, so which means that you could write stories, you could write anything that you wanted. But then what happened is, over a period of time, it became a vanity project. Okay, so people started writing on all kinds of personal things, and then it ran into millions. Okay, so people, who has the time to read everything? And then what is also, what is one of the important attributes of, say, a formal media, mainstream media, is this processing that happens. See, news that you read, is something that is processed, which means that, like I told you, when I file something, that story will not appear the way I have written it. People are going to ask me questions. There'll be a lot of things at the back end. There'll be, so basically what it means is that whatever news you report is not, it doesn't come out just the way it is. There'll be discussions, etc., etc. Now, in a blog, what happens is whatever you write, it comes out unfiltered. Nobody looks at it. It just comes out the way it is. And then sometimes we can make mistakes. There can be, all of us are human beings, and we can actually make genuine errors. So the blogging part of it somehow hasn't taken off. News blogging is, that's why you get lost. Whatever you write, it will get lost in the maze of news that are circulating everywhere. Okay, so news blogging is kind of out of fashion. In fact, I would suggest that if you have a story, and then if you think it's a good story, you should hand it over to websites, which are news websites, or television, or whatever. It depends on what kind of news you have, because not only will it get published in a, it'll get published in a mainstream format, you will also get paid for it. In most cases, you'll get paid for it as well. So I think that is a better bet, and your reach will be far more, and the credibility is also will be very, very high.
Thank you, sir. I hope Miss Divya Chobe is satisfied with this answer. Then we have a question from Ms. Melvin Pinto and Mr. Simon, also similar question. Going forward, is digital media is the new revenue model for print media as well? I mean, digital model is the new revenue model for print media as well.
See, okay, so what is also happening is that, see, the print medium is different from the digital medium. Okay, now the print medium has to reinvent itself. Right now, what is happening around the world, okay, is that the digital medium leans heavily on the print medium for revenues. For instance, if you have say the Deccanal website or the Hindu website, the website actually depends on the print, on the Hindu newspaper or the Deccanal newspaper. It's the other way around. It is not the newspaper depends on the digital medium. Now, it is very, not a great idea for one to depend on the other. The print medium has to innovate and ensure that the circulation goes up on its own steam and earns revenue. The digital medium independently has to earn its own revenue. One, even if it's within the same company, it's not a great idea for one to depend on the other. You understand? So if by chance the digital medium does well and the print medium is depending on revenues from the digital medium, it's not good, because the digital medium also needs those very same funds for expansion, for making it better. Here what will happen is you're diluting that money that is coming in by, putting it on in print. And the print medium, by its very nature, because it uses newspaper, printing, the overheads are much higher. It brings in, it consumes a lot of money, far more than the digital medium. So I would really say that each should be independent of each other.
Sir, Mr. Aaron Menezes has a question.
Yeah.
What are the future prospects of traditional media with the emergence of digital media? Especially, people are involved so much in Facebook and WhatsApp. What are the future prospects of newspapers?
See, the way it looks, okay, if there are, let's say a couple of scenarios. In the first scenario, if the newspapers don't wake up in terms of the news that they actually print. Like I told you, if during the day there has been an event and you have already know about the event by looking at websites on the television, the next morning you still have the same news on page 1, which you already know. It's going to be a problem, because then people will say, why should I pay more money to read the same news? So if that is in the first scenario, so the newspapers have to really look deep and change things, and it requires a lot of courage to do that, because it's not very easy to change the way you look at news, how you project news, what should be on page 1, what should be the mix of news. Because for me to buy a newspaper, there should be a reason for me to buy the newspaper. So that reason is something that the newspapers have to cater to. And it requires, it's not going to be easy, let me tell you. It's going to take at least the next 4-5 years. But the newspaper comes with certain inherent advantages. It's not like the newspaper is completely, there's an issue with, the medium. Because you don't need the net, you don't need electricity. You can just buy it in a shop, read it wherever you want, whenever you want. Okay, so newspapers definitely serves a certain purpose. It is very easy to handle. Access is also very simple. So there are a lot of things going for the newspaper as a medium. Okay, but in terms of content, there has to be a rethink. And this is something that we within the profession, some of us have been discussing this for a very, very long time. For instance, I was working in Delhi. I was with the Deccan Herald Bureau in Delhi. Okay, so at that point, in the early 90s, you had this newspaper called The Pioneer, which was started in Delhi. Now, when The Pioneer started in Delhi, you had Hindustan Times, which was dominant there. Then you had Times of India, which is almost like the Hindustan Times. Then you had Express. So you had very big players in Delhi. So people were wondering, why is this Pioneer starting now, and what is it going to do? Will it survive? But Vinod Mehta was the editor of Pioneer, and he completely turned the page one inside out. You should see it dramatically changed the concept of news. And so the way news used to be presented in the other papers, he just came and completely changed everything. And the Pioneer started doing very well in Delhi. He did very well under Vinod Mehta. And not only that, the other newspapers like Hindustan Times and Hindustan Times editor personally also told me this, that when they saw Pioneer and then they realized, Arey, what have we been doing all these years? Let's also change. So everybody changed. And Pioneer did very well. So it requires a certain amount of inventiveness. So if that happens, print media definitely will survive.
So we have a question related to OTT platforms. OTT platforms, yeah.
Right.
See, now that entertainment industry has made inroad into OTT platform, is there any potential for news outlets also to exploit this OTT platforms? This is a question from Mr. Vishal Nayak from Aloysius College, Mangalore.
Already, I mean, if you look at the digital medium, it's already doing what the OTT is doing. No? What more should the news medium do? What is OTT at the end of the day? It's the over the top distribution. And in the case of movies, okay, and OTT normally, the OTT has been used maximum by movies, by the film industry, and it's used by the film industry to get over some of the issues about theaters and this distribution syndicates, and then, like, for instance, during this COVID time, people were still able to release their films because of OTT. When large people, when the movie theaters are shut. But if you look at the digital medium, it's already doing that. So why would it need to go on the OTT? It doesn't make sense.
We have a question from Ms. Charlotte, and another person also has a similar question. What is the future prospects of journalism courses, and also future prospects of job opportunities in relation to digital media as well as traditional media?
See, this is right now, nobody can deny that the media is going through a crisis. Okay, so there are no jobs. So if you're in a journalism job and you quit your job, it's actually very difficult to get another job. Okay, and especially if you are at the mid-level and the higher level, where you are earning, let's say, a fairly large salary, it's very difficult to get another job. Okay, if you are still in the the entry point of journalism, there is not a major problem. Jobs are still there because the salaries are not that high, and so the managements can afford to have people at the lower rung of the hierarchy. Okay, so but then if you look at journalism schools, so the immediate question is, why should somebody do a journalism course now when there are no jobs? Okay, the point here is that there are jobs for journalism students. That's what I'm trying to say. So, and the other point is that journalism institutes are also constantly evolving. Okay, so I'm also associated with a journalism institute called IIJNM, Indian Institute of Journalism and New Media. So I'm a visiting faculty there. So there is also a lot of discussion going on within the faculty and within the journalism teachers groups, that, we have to also change. And so what is happening there is that even in terms of training, okay, for instance, in journalism schools, when you go in for training, earlier you used to have either a print, then you had a television, and you had a broadcast. But today what is also happening is that along with these separate streams where you need specialized attention, there is also what is known as a convergence. So students, especially who are in the multimedia stream, they learn both video and print along with their digital medium technology. So even that is constantly evolving. So for instance, the batch that is being taught in a certain way now is very different from the way the same a batch was taught, say, 10 years ago. So it has evolved, actually. It has evolved, and it is growing up. And then the point with the crisis, the media situation, is a temporary. It's a temporary phase. Once, let's say, the COVID vaccine is found, and maybe in the next few months, the human race is able to control the coronavirus, then things will again limp back to normal. When it comes back to normal, everything else will also fall in place. So it's a temporary phase only. So the media is not going anywhere. It's going to be very much around, and very much active. It's a this phase is not a permanent phase. It'll change.
Yes, sir. Can we take up a few more questions, sir?
Yeah, up to you. I'm okay.
Sir, Purnanand, sir, can we take up questions, sir?
Sure.
Sir, Mr. Ishwar Chandra is a journalist from Manipal, and Mr. Prashant Malur is an academician. They have a similar question. How to tackle fake news in digital media? That is their question.
Yeah. See, fake news, the way this can be handled is really by, when I say educating the reader, it sounds very cliched, because educating this, educating that, somehow, I myself feel, it's a very cliched thing. But what is necessary is that people should, like, say, when you read something which you find, is something that you can't believe. Say, for instance, if you read some story about how a dog ate a tiger or something, on the face of it, it looks very, it's impossible. How can a dog eat a tiger? But then you get stories like that sometimes, And then the point is that you must always cross-check. So there are tools to actually look at news and verify whether news is fake or not. And these are very easily available on Google. So people should also learn to verify themselves. When they see a certain kind of news, they should just spare 2 minutes before forwarding it to other people. Check whether it is true or not. Okay, and then if they find that it is true, they can forward it. But if they find there is an issue with it, they should not forward it. So it's a certain responsibility that people should feel for themselves. Otherwise, I don't see any way by which this can be stopped or prevented, or even reduced. I really doubt it. Though there is, of course, let me not be so pessimistic. There are attempts being made, for instance, today it's very easy to check whether let's say you have a doubt about a certain news item. You can easily check with some of these, sites which actually check, like Boom and all that, so where they actually look at your query and they get back to you and say whether it's true or not. Okay, so, yeah.
Yes, sir. Dr. Vijaya Vardhini, she has a question. Sir, do you think social media will replace all traditional or modern media in future? All other media? Maybe that's what she implies. Do you think social media will replace all other media in future?
No, that's impossible. Because what is social media at the end of the day? It's, let's say on Facebook, you see something, and then you say, you respond to, let's say, a particular event or an item or a story. Then you have a conversation. Or on WhatsApp, you forward certain things, or you're in a group, people, it's basically a space for conversation. Basically, social media is actually a space for conversation. But if you want to really still know why the Second World War happened, you can't get it on social media. Or if you want to know, let's say you want to assess the performance of, let's say, the Modi government, you can't go on social media and get that information. You have to still rely on traditional media. So traditional media cannot be replaced. I mean, when I meant traditional media, what I mean the mainstream media, including digital or whatever it is, they will remain. Social media can never replace, this. It cannot, because social media. Let's also face it. It's chaotic. It's completely free for all. Okay. At the most, social media. One thing I can predict: social media will destroy families. It will destroy relationships. It will make enemies out of old friends. This much I can tell you.
Yes, sir. One more question from Ms. Shilpa Matthew. What may be the reason for pulp news? She's talking about pulp news that is streamed on on Facebook, even by that is soft kind of a news in the which is streamed on Facebook, even by traditional news outlets. What may be the reason? That's what she's asking.
See,
Even when
one
there
thing-
is after all this gatekeeping, what is the reason for this pulp news being streamed in Facebook and other digital platforms?
pulp news is what I mean. I didn't understand that actually.
Pulp news, I think stories in the guise of posts in the guise of news. I mean, soft kind of a news, which is posted in Facebook and other
See,
Instagram.
okay. See, I mean, I'm assuming this is what the questioner is asking about. Means by pulp news, news that is not serious, news that is probably a little, juicy, more like gossip. Is that what that person means? I don't know. So if that is the case, see, as long as it is not, it doesn't hurt anybody, or it is not too speculative, or it's not fake, it's not wrong. What happens is that sometimes these kind of news also gets a lot of attention, and a lot of people like to read. And see, also remember that for instance, you have these influencers. There are people called influencers in social media. Now, these influencers are people who have a massive following. They have, say, 100,000 people following them, 200,000 people following, and they, say all kinds of things. They make comments on anything and everything. Okay, so, and there are a lot of people who are tuning in on listening to them. The point here is that these people also get a lot of money by the number of hits, because in Google, that you will get advertising when you cross a certain number of hits. So many people, so even Facebook and all that, see, Facebook thrives basically on the number of hits that it gets. Okay, number of people eyeballs, or number of views of anything that they put out. So there is a revenue element to it. So, but that is, as long as, like I told you, as long as it is not harmful, it is not fake, I guess it's all right. I mean, it's okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We have a question from Yatish L. Kodawat. After this, we'll take one last question.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
We have a question from Yatish Kodawat from Folklore University, Karnataka. In the situation of digital divide, how digital media can reach out to rural masses? That is what his question.
Well, the long and short of it is that digital media cannot reach the rural masses, because if there is no infrastructure, if there is no, that is one of the limitations of digital media. I mean, if let's say you are sitting in some village and there is no internet connectivity, how can you? So you can't. So that is a limitation of digital media, and that is also a reason why traditional media or newspapers will not die, because newspapers will always be needed in these places. And for the digital medium to reach there, the infrastructure has to come first. But that's because there is no infrastructure, the digital news website can't shut down, isn't it?
Yes.
At some point it will reach. I mean, at some point the infrastructure will come. People will have access. Already, I think things are far better now than, say, about 10 years, 15 years ago, in terms of, say, the internet connectivity and all that. It's far, far, far more. And it's also, I think, increasing rapidly. So, let's say 5 years down the line, if we have a similar discussion, you'll find that far more, the digital divide is far less than what it is now.
Yes, sir. So one last question from Rupali Prakash Rao. She's asking whether social media is promoting grapevine communication in relation to propaganda. That's what she's asking. with customized messages that we receive. I think she is asking in relation to that, whether social media is promoting grapevine communications.
Yeah, I mean, this is what happened in the previous elections in the US. What happened is that, that all those issues about, the leakage of many of the news accounts and all that, and then how they targeted news. For instance, let us say you support a party A, and then elections are around the corner, or just on the eve of elections, party B sends you information saying that party A is contemplating a certain kind of an action or a government move, which you don't like. Now, the amount of information on an individual that collected by Facebook is so much that you'll be surprised. In fact, there was a documentary on this which said that Facebook knows more about you than your own spouse knows about you. To that extent, Facebook in the US, especially because everything there is online. It's not as much as in India, but in the US, in Western Europe, where the internet technology is so advanced, everything about you, like right from your driver's license to your property numbers, your everything is known. Okay, so and then they will also know politically which side, which party you support, and what are the issues that you are interested in. Okay, now let's say, for instance, you are planning to vote for the Democrats. Just on the day before in fact, this is what happened actually. One day before the election, the Democrat voters got news targeted to them, saying how Hillary Clinton was planning on a certain move, which the Democrats actually don't like. Democrat supporters didn't like. So many of them changed their mind and voted for Trump. So, I mean, so this is, the point is that that's why I said anything that we read on social media, we have to take it with a pinch of salt by definition. Only, if once it's confirmed, only we should believe. So it's like, suppose, let's say, in a criminal case, you are guilty, you're innocent until proven guilty. Any news on social media is fake until proven, real, something like that. You have to be very careful. I mean, that's something that only over time, these things will happen.
So one last question, because it is interesting. I thought it is interesting. From Ilaya Raja KS, he's asking why government is not regulating circulation of fake news in the digital media.
I mean, the government itself is an interested party. So why would they want to regulate fake news?
Yeah.
No, the government itself historically used to push the kind of news that they want. No? It's called planting news, saying things which are not true. So everyone is in the game, and everyone tries to benefit from it. So they will not regulate this.
Thank you very much, sir, for that lively and very lively session. Now I request Dr. Satish Kumar to propose a vote of thanks. Over to you, Satish, sir. Sir, can we have one more question, sir? Because there's some technical issue.
Okay, sure.
Bhavana M, she has a question. Can there be instances where there has been scarcity of news or news items? On what basis it is filtered while being reported in relation to all media, including digital media, sir?
News, I've worked, I've been in this profession for the last more than 30 years. I've never come across a situation when there was no news. There is always something or the other happening around in the world. Okay. So, and there are certain, when you say how news is filtered, there are some very basic guidelines. For instance, let's say, somebody speaks, let's say there's a press conference, some politician is addressing a press conference. You report that news, that's also, and you make sure that you report truthfully or correctly what the politician or whoever has said. That is one way of, by which news is filtered. The other thing is, let us say there is some event like the riots that happened yesterday in Bangalore. You talk to one section of people, then you talk to the people who are affected by it. Then you try to talk to all cross sections, to everyone. Try to talk to the police, try to talk to some government representative, talk to the two warring parties, which were actually fighting with each other. Or so you try to talk to as many people as possible, so you get a rounded view of the issue, right, of the event. So these are very general, basic guidelines in journalism. So whether you are in digital, television, print, yesterday, today, tomorrow, these will always need to be adhered to. And this is, also part of the system. Like all of us are trained to do that. As a journalist, you are trained to ask questions and ensure that the news is correct.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you once again for this wonderful session, sir. We have more questions coming in, but we have to end this meeting, sir.
Yes.
I request Dr. Satish Kumar to propose vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Respected speaker and the participants. It is my pleasure to propose vote of thanks. First of all, I thank Professor B.P. Veerabhadrappa, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Kuvepu University. He has inaugurated this national webinar by his thoughtful inaugural address. Thank you, sir. I also thank the speaker of the first session, Mr. K.S. Dakshinamurthy, the associate editor of the Federal.com. He has delivered an insightful lecture. Thank you, sir. I thank our chairman, Professor Varghese. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, sir. I also thank my teacher and colleague, Professor D.S. Purnananda, and also my colleague, Dr. Satyaprakash M.R. Thank you. I also thank all the teachers, students, research scholars of our department, and also different departments of our university. And also, I thank all the teachers, research scholars, and students from the different colleges and universities of all over India. Thank you, one and all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. With that, that we have come to the end of this first session, sir. Thank you very much for joining us, Dakshinamurthy, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, dear participants, for joining us. We'll meet again at 3 p.m. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.